Also, just to let you know, because of the time constraint, we might be going beyond 9 o'clock. So again, we have the recordings available on our YouTube channel, so you can access them if you really have to shut down at 9. So join us promptly. As a matter of fact, for the quiz and any other introductory session, if you want to join us at 8 o'clock from next class onwards, that would be great. I'll log in at 8. We'll do some introduction between ourselves. Just have a little candid session before Dr. Ihab joins us at 8:15 promptly.
And again, I'm reminding the brothers and sisters that, again, here we are trying to basically summarize many of the details, but you're going to find all of these details, inshallah, in the web series that's on islamicsource.org. So you're going to find more details about what we're talking about. We're just trying to condense that to a certain extent. Again, during the 2 weeks in between our meetings, feel free to go to the website and watch, if you do have the time, inshallah, watch the full episodes. And again, if you have any questions or comments about anything that we mentioned here or in any of these episodes, please feel free to ask these questions.
Dr. Ihab, I'm not sure if anybody is sending you questions. I have one just to kick off the process. And unless you find something good, then you can divert that. So one of the elements of the travel from Mecca to Medina, in terms of getting some practice in the dawah sessions, it is mentioned that Musa alayhi salam used to say that there will be a person, very similar to me coming, and basically, mention about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in his journey from from Mecca to Medina, there are also very similar things that Isa alayhi salam went through. So as we come near to the Easter, as they basically celebrate, there is basically a mention of Ash Wednesday and then Palm Tuesday and so forth. It all basically reflects some of the incidents that Isa alayhi salam had to take, and they were basically hiding his footprints by using palm leaves. And there are many incidents that are very similar and basically narrates the whole history behind the whole the events that goes into the Easter. So just was reflecting the fact that the Rasul had some same type of sequences also when migrating from Mecca to Medina.
I think the lesson basically from comparing the story of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the stories of any other prophet is that although that all of these prophets were granted the protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, none of them just said, okay, I'm protected, I'm not going to follow the earthly reasons and the earthly means. So we find Sayyidina Musa ala nabina alayhi salatu wasalam, for example, when he left Egypt in a rush, and it was a very long and arduous trip. He was traveling by himself, and he left very suddenly after the warning from that believer who came from the far end of the city to warn him about Fir'aun and his people trying to capture and kill Sayyidina Musa ala nabina alayhi salatu wasalam. He traveled on his own on this long trip without any provisions, without any preparation, and it was a very hard trip. He just used to eat whatever vegetation he used to find on the sides of the road or in the desert on his journey. And it shows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the story or the part of the story in Surah Al-Qasas, when he arrived in Madian, in Palestine, he was extremely exhausted, extremely tired, and he rested in the shade of a tree. And yet he remembered the bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of guiding him, the bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of saving him. And he made this beautiful dua, Rabbi inni lima anzalta ilayya min khayrin faqir. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I am in true need and I am poor towards the bounties that you can bestow upon me. So I'm welcoming any bounty that you bestow upon me, and I appreciate all of these bounties, and I cannot thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enough for all of these bounties. Immediately after he says these beautiful words, we know the story about the two young ladies who were trying to filled their water pots and how he interfered on their behalf. Again, tired, exhausted, but social justice is part of his fabric. He could not see, he could not tolerate seeing this injustice of strong people pushing and shoving, and these two women standing back, not being able to fill their pots. So with his known physical strength, والسلام, although he was so tired and exhausted, he still had the strength to go and take the pots from these two ladies and push people around and fill these pots for those two young ladies, which, as we know, resulted in his marriage to one of them, ala nabiyina wa alayhi salatu wasalam, and staying in Madian for 10 years, living there peacefully. And then on his way back to Egypt, he received the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Similarly, for Sayyidina Isa ala nabiyina wa alayhi salatu wasalam, we find that in his blessed life as a great prophet and messenger alayhi salatu wasalam, he again took all the possible means. When he used to meet with his companions, they tried to stay in hiding from the eyes of the Roman soldiers who were trying to capture him and try to arrest him and kill him, ala nabiyina wa alayhi salatu wasalam, until he was betrayed by one of those disciples or one of these followers. And we know that this disciple, again, the version that we have in Islam, which is what we believe in, it is that this disciple is the one who used to resemble Sayyidina Isa ala nabiyina wa alayhi salatu wasalam, and he is the one who was captured. The one who betrayed Sayyidina Isa is the one who was captured and the one who was crucified, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved Sayyidina Isa and lifted him to the heavens. Our brother Mateen has a question. How was the Torah preserved until the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Did the Jews also memorize it? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, jazakallahu khairan for the question. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us about the way of preservation of this, of the Torah. It was preserved in their minds, in their hearts, but most importantly also in scrolls. It was preserved in writing, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes, تَجْعَلُونَهَا قَرَاطِيسَ تُبْدُونَهَا وَتُخْفُونَ كَثِيرًا, that you made it into the form of sheets of parchment or leather or whatever and scrolls, and they had the whole version, but in some cases they modified the authentic version. In some other cases, instead of modifying it, they hid parts of it and they would show only the parts that would give them credibility. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala criticized that fact, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminded them, أَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضِ. Do you believe in parts of that book that was revealed to you, and you show disbelief in other parts of that book? So any book, any revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should be taken as a whole. We cannot, and this is one of the lessons that are revealed to us in Surah Al-Baqarah, particularly that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us, we have to take it as a whole and not pick and choose whatever suits us and hide and disregard whatever we feel is hard to achieve or hard to follow or does not suit us in that particular location or that particular time. The book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should be preserved and should be taken as a whole according to the instructions of the Prophet who was sent with that book. In the case of Sayyidina Musa, of the Torah, Sayyidina Musa ala nabiyina wa alayhi salatu wasalam, in case of the Injil, Sayyidina Isa ala nabiyina wa alayhi salatu wasalam, and in case of the Quran, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala entrusted humans to preserve these books, unfortunately, they showed their unreliability. So in the case of the Jews, they did not preserve the Torah, they modified it, they hid parts of it, etc. They were selective about its use. In case of the Christians, of the followers of Sayyidina Isa ala nabiyina wa alayhi salatu wasalam, they did the same. They hid parts of it, they modified parts of it, they denied parts of it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sending the Quran to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to be the final, conclusive and comprehensive message. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pledged that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be the one who's going to preserve it. Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun. And this is another miracle to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the Quran has not been modified all over these centuries. Wherever you go and at different times, you're going to find the authentic version of the Quran. Now, let me mention that there are different ways of reading the Quran, even different ways of printing the Quran. So you're going to find a word written in a certain way in some versions, and it's a certain different way in other versions. And that's still part of the preservation of the Quran, because again, when the Quran was revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it did not have punctuation. So the letters of the Arabic language, we know that many of the letters have dots, like the jim, for example, or the kha. If you put the dot below the letter, it's a jim. If you put it above the letter, it's a kha. If you do not put the dot, it's a ha. So the Quran was revealed without these dots. And people used to rely on its memorization based on the person they heard reciting the Quran. Some tribes used to recite it in a certain way. Some tribes used to recite it in a different ways, in a different way. So for example, just to give you a very simple example here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us about one of the signs of the Day of Judgment. فَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ. That people are going to come from every elevated place, from every hill for the resurrection in a plain land. They are descending from every elevated place. And this is an accepted recitation of the Quran, and this is an accepted understanding of the Quran. In another recitation of the Quran, in another recording, written recording of the Quran, فَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ جَدَثٍ يَنْسِلُونَ. Hadab and Jadath, when you look at these two words and you remove all the dots, they have the same structure. Hadab means elevated place. Jadath means grave. فَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ جَدَثٍ يَنْسِلُونَ, which means they're rising out of their graves, which again is a sign of the resurrection on the Day of Judgment. So again, it's the preservation of the Quran. The core of the Quran has not been changed. And all of these slight changes between one recitation or another does not in any way, shape, or form change the meaning of the Quran or the core message of the Quran. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has pledged to preserve. Wallah. Brother Khalid is asking, was the husband of Asma bint Abu Bakr radiallahu anha Muslim when she was assisting the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam during migration? Yes, he was. The husband of Sayyidah Asma radiallahu anha was the cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Az-Zubayr ibn al-Awwam radiallahu anhu. His mother was Safiya, the paternal aunt of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was a young companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam who had migrated to Al-Habasha and then came back to Mecca and stayed in Mecca. He did not stay for too long in Al-Habasha. He married Sayyidah Asma radiallahu anha, and their firstborn actually was born in Medina in the first year of the hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was in fact the firstborn Muslim in Al-Madinah Munawwara to immigrant parents, and his name was Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu wa an abihi wa Brother, I have a question, I think, from Brother Ikram. For the benefit of class members, what PhD program do you recommend us to join in order to study Seerah? Seriously, if dedicating it 100%, I don't know. I can't give you any advice about that because I'm not familiar with the different PhD programs that are available for the study of the Seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I lack this knowledge. I do not know. But maybe, inshallah, we can communicate with Dr. Hassan Ashab, who has the Taysir Seminary in Knoxville, Tennessee. They have a year-long program for the study of Islamic knowledge, and he himself got his PhD in Islamic studies, I believe, from Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. So maybe he might know about such programs. And I know that Dr. Yasser Qadi, who was here in the Triangle this last week, he got his PhD in Islamic Studies from Yale University. So at least these are two places where we know of people graduating from, inshallah, having great knowledge. But inshallah, maybe one of them can provide a better answer.
Assalamu alaikum. Oh, I'm sorry. I had put on myself mute. The one question that came up from the recording series of your original material was regarding the, in fact, I was very confused about this verse that the Jews did not like, or, the fact that Allah mentions that who will be enemy of Angel Jibril is an enemy of me. So I was wondering who would be an enemy of Angel Jibril, and you mentioned in your recording basically it was the Jews. Is it because in their in their religion, Musa alayhi salam got it directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then everything else came afterwards, like Angel Jibril coming to Isa alayhi salam, Angel Jibril coming to Muhammad alayhi salam?
No, actually, that was actually a pretense or an excuse that they used to reject the message of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They claim that in our books, which is a false claim, by the way, in our books, Jibril is the one who comes with destruction. So he's an angel of destruction. He's the messenger from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to destroy different villages that disobey different villages that disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for that reason, they said, we do not like Jibril, we like Israfil, but we do not like Jibril, or we like Mikael, but we like Jibril, but we don't like Jibril. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded to them that it's not up to you to choose which messenger, which angel from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala carries which orders. And again, that was a false excuse, but because in their books, they have nothing against Sayyidina Jibril alayhi salam, because he does not act on his own, he acts only on instructions from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes Sayyidina Jibril in Surah Al-Takwir, مُطَاعٍ ثَمَّ أَمِينٍ. He is obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he's obeyed among the other angels because he is the archangels or the leader of the angels alayhi salam, and he only acts upon commands from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he is the trusted messenger or carrier of al-wahy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to his prophets. So again, this was just a negation to their false excuse attacking Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam. Brother Mateen also asks, is it in tradition that Hazrat Khadija, Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha, was a very educated woman during the time she was about to get married to our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What kind of education prevailed at the time in Mecca? Well, if you look at the Arab society, the pagan Arab society at that time, it was very patriarchal. Patriarchal means that it was primarily relying on men and not on women. However, women from prominent families were exposed to basic education. Basic education is primarily reading and writing, probably very basic math, because she was the heir. She inherited wealth from her family, and she was a wealthy woman. She inherited wealth from her husbands who died before she married the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So she was a trader, and that's how she hired the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and got to know the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and later on married the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But there were no schools, for example. There were no official schools, neither for men nor for women. Basically, men learned from their businesses, from their interaction with other tribes. There were some basic literacy programs teaching them how to read and write, and not all of them were literate, by the way. And among them, among the illiterate, was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was not uncommon for a person to be illiterate. So reading and writing were not the only signs of education, because education, its broader sense, is knowing what is useful in life. So we learned that the Prophet ﷺ was a very successful trader. He bought, he sold, he exchanged, he bartered, and so on. Although he was illiterate, but again, he used some of the natural skills that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him, and he learned from the surrounding environment around him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Therefore, at that time, when the Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha was growing up, there was no particular education for women. There were no schools for women, or no scholarship for women, or anything like that. But she was learned. She knew how to read and write, and she again learned how to manage her business or delegate someone to manage her business. Radiallahu anha. Later on in Islam, afterwards in Medina, to show that education is a right for both men and women, and to start structuring it in a certain way, the Prophet ﷺ cared about all of his companions, or all the people of Medina, learning at least to read and write. So later on, we're going to learn, for example, that part of the ransom that the pagans, the prisoners of war in the Battle of Badr, the poor ones who could not pay money to pay for their own freedom, the Prophet ﷺ gave them a condition that for each one of them to teach 10 of the people of Medina who were illiterate how to read and write. So the Prophet ﷺ cared about propagating at least this basic education, which later on grew into a more gradually, more structured form. So men and women later on became not only literate, but also became to acquire this scholarship. So knowing the knowledge of the Quran, the knowledge of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and so on and so forth. But at least, as far as I know, for Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha, he did not attend any one of these formal programs.
Okay, inshallah, if there's no other questions, Dr. Ihab, anything from your side to wrap it up?
Wallahi, jazakumullah khairan, all great questions, alhamdulillah, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us all learn together and most importantly implement or apply what we learn into our own lives, and to use this knowledge to invite other people to Islam. Again, this is public knowledge that we should all share together, inshallah, and learn together. And if I make a mistake, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive my mistakes and to correct me. And basically, all the brothers and sisters are more than welcome again to give feedback or to give comments, or even if you have any questions between our meetings, feel free to email me and send me these questions, inshallah. What does that
mean? Yeah, thank you for reminding. Inshallah, PS, while you review the course material, please like the videos. It helps us out. Inshallah, just from the views point of view. So please do that. Do not forget to read through the materials, and inshallah we'll meet back on March 7th.
I'm going to confirm that with you at least a week beforehand. I might be traveling on that day, but it's not confirmed yet. But I'm going to confirm it with you at least a week in advance. So initially, inshallah, we're going to meet on March 7th. But in case something happens, I'm going to notify you one week in advance so that you can tell all the brothers and sisters, and then we can shift it to the following Thursday, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم.